rhythm guitars first. I have 2 amps that I'm blending. 6505 and an Archon. This is the same blend I used on the last Archspire album, and I actually bought a real Archon, a PRS Archon amp because I liked it so much. And then when it came time to reamp for this album, I tried it, and while it did sound good, I ended up just using the same profile I had of the Archon because it just had something additional that was like, I don't know, it's something that the actual Archon didn't. I still use the real one, but it's kind of silly to spend the money on the actual amp and then just use a profile. But it is what it is. Whatever sounds best is what you use, right? Doesn't matter how much money you paid for it. And I have both amps going to separate stems, so I can process them separately with EQ and then also use one fader per amp to find the blend that I like. And then both of those feed this rhythm guitar bus. So I'm going to turn this up for now. We'll leave them at Unity. We're going to check out what they sound like individually, and then we'll find our blend. And I wiped the faders when we opened the project, so I don't remember what the original blend was, but we'll just make a new one. I mixed it once, I can do it again. And these are raw. The only thing that's on these is just the tape and the VCC, which is, pretty minimal. There's nothing else in the chain that I can see at this point, except for some auto line. That's just making sure the phase is coherent between the 6505 tracks and the Archon tracks. Okay, so let's listen to a little bit more of that 6505 and then switch and listen to the Archon profile and see how they differ. Uh, 6505 again. I definitely like the 6505 more. Like, honestly, by itself, the profile sounds not great. But what I discovered during the first Archspire album is that just blending in, for whatever reason, blending in this profile works really well with a lot of amps. It just adds this cool, punchy forward element. It really works well as a blend source. So I'm going to leave the 6505 at Unity and pull the Archon down and then bring it in, and we can kind of find a cool balance here. Yeah, those just blend so well. It doesn't always work that way, but for whatever reason, this adds a lot. It like fills in all the holes. It adds some thick mids. It makes the notes pop forward a little more, and I just love it. I think I'll probably be using this particular profile to blend in with all kinds of amps for years to come. That sounds pretty similar to probably where I had it. Okay, so let's take a look at the processing kind of in order of operation here. So the first thing I would do was like I guess I'd call it stage 1 EQ, typically corrective EQ, balancing EQ on each amp, probably first. So the 6505 is looking like this. It looks like I saved all of my high passing and low passing for the master group. So let's see what happens when we bring in these EQs on each amp. 6505 first. Nothing groundbreaking here. This is like the spots that are going to be apparent in almost every disordered guitar. It's like the muddy low-mid region and then controlling the 2 to 4K range. It looks like I'm pulling a little bit more of the fizz out too. Sometimes vintage 30s can just get a touch hairy up top. And the 6505 can be pretty bright the way I like to set it up, but nothing too crazy. Let's take a look at the Archon. A little heavier handed just because it's kind of a notchy sound to begin with. So pulling more mids out and just trying to open it up a little bit. Yeah, even by itself, it does have like an aggressive character, which is pretty pleasing. The thing I'll point out is that I have both of these plugins since we're using two different EQs on two sources that are very similar, and distorted guitars in general are very sensitive to phase discrepancies. So both of these Pro Qs are in linear phase mode, where almost all the time I'm using natural phase. Every once in a while, if you need to absolutely maintain phase when you're separately EQing two sources that are like essentially the same, very similar sources, a linear phase mode is going to give you a little bit more phase coherency and retention post those processors. It also comes with its own set of drawbacks like pre-ringing and enhanced delay compensation and latency and that kind of stuff. So use it sparingly, but in certain situations like this where it's necessary. So that's what we have going on in our first stage. And then both of these mixed feed to our master rhythm guitar group. And we got a handful of things on here. We have the VCC bus console. I'm trimming down a bit to keep the levels in range. That may really not be the case because I reset up my faders here. So let's see where we are gain stage wise. That's probably about right. I like to be bouncing up here in the red a little bit. And then my kind of like cleanup duo that I lean on. I never really decide if I like Be Extra Refinement first or Soothe first. And I don't honestly think it matters too much. But these two have pretty much taken the place of the incessant, crazy person, psychopathic resonant frequency hunting that I have done in years past, where I'm pulling up one of these and just doing these tiny Q cuts, and I'm like fanatically trying to find every resonant, and then I end up with something that looks ridiculous like this, or like 8 more of those. I'm very happy to put those years behind me. But while they serve their purpose, it's just so easy to fall down that rabbit hole. We talked about this on the stream yesterday too. Putting your brain in that mindset of searching for those resonant frequency zones is, I think, harmful to like the rest of your day. Essentially, you make yourself become overly sensitive to that sort of thing, and you start hearing them everywhere in every source. And then it's so easy to overdo it at that point. You're not doing anything other than like annihilating resonant frequencies when most of them probably weren't really problem areas to begin with. You just became too highly keyed into them. While in the past, it was a necessary evil, and I kind of learned ways of insulating myself from becoming too sensitive, like either spacing that task out or forcing myself to like only listen to the first like 2 or 3 areas that were most prominent and then stop after that. I much prefer to use some of these smart tools that we have at our disposal now, and the combo of these two works great. I could probably get away with just Soothe. It's probably the more powerful of the two. But if I use them both in a fairly subtle manner, like I know I've got a big boost here, but the depth is actually down pretty low, and then this is about as high as I ever use refinement. I'll turn these on and we can hear what they do in the same chunk. That's actually pretty aggressive right now. So I must have some EQing after this that's bringing back some of that brilliance, because it is killing some of the resonant frequencies, obviously, but it's also kind of hurting the tone. It's fine sometimes because since it works in a dynamic fashion, it's pulling those down in like a dynamic way, so you can go back in with EQ and just boost the entire area later to get some of the life back. But then it's some of the harsher elements and the more peaky parts that maybe aren't consistent are still being controlled in the soothe instance. But yeah, just bringing it in by itself, it's too extreme. If I were dialing this in right now, I'd probably pull it back. And let's see what refinement's doing. Very similar thing. It works in a slightly different area. Obviously, there's a lot less information it's giving you, so you kind of just have to use your ears more, which is both good and bad. But the combo of these, regardless, work pretty well. I have played around with the Cornif Audio. I think it's called the AIP, Amplified Instrument Processor, and it has a similar function that I also like. And if I didn't have these, I would definitely be using that more often. But it's sort of like I kind of already found a workflow with these, so I didn't really feel the need to switch. But if you don't have Soothe or BX Refinement, then the AIP is a useful tool also that gives you tons of other utilities like EQ and compression. So very cool plugin. Okay, so now we have a good blend, some problem areas fixed, and we have a smooth but a little bit dull, I'll say, tone after Soothe and BX Refinement. So let's see what happens with these next two EQs. All right, so this should balance out. Obviously, here is where my high pass and low pass come into play. Rather than adding upper mids, we're just cutting more low mids in comparison. So has the overall effect of giving us more of those upper mid areas. So let's see what it sounds like when we bring in this first EQ. Pretty huge amount. These are big dips. I mean, we're down probably almost 10 dB at around 200. So a lot happening. Or probably taking that back a little bit. It's a little bit of give and take. You know, I probably could have gone back to that first EQ and altered things in a way to make it a little bit less aggressive in the upper mids like I'm controlling here. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're working fast and you're trying to like follow the way your brain is pulling your attention to certain things, it's sometimes easier just to pull up another EQ and tack on. So there's pros and cons there. You're possibly creating phase issues and just overcomplicating the whole situation if you're stacking conflicting EQs on top of one another. But in the end, if it gets you to the sound you're looking for, then it's not really a problem. You know, it's just about the process. It's balancing the best technical path versus the creative side of the job. I feel like that's what mixing and producing is in almost all contexts. We have to be that one person that like we're still artists, we're still creating art, but there's a higher technical requirement to this side of the art form than there is in most of the other parts of music. I think that's one of the things that draws me to music production in general, is it just really combines a lot of the left brain, right brain stuff. Nothing you really think about. But it's definitely part of what's happening every time you open a session to mix, or you're engineering or even producing. Combination of both of those. Just killed some of that rattiness. So let's bring these in, the rhythms in with bass, find a level there, and we'll maybe revisit some of this blend if we feel like we need to.